So for more, let's bring in now Eddie Goldenberg, former Chief of Staff to former Liberal Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, now a Senior Advisor at Global Public Affairs. Mr. Goldenberg, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, we just heard from Pierre Poilievre. I think I'll begin there. What is your reaction to not only his words, but, also from Yves-François Blanchet, and in a statement essentially from the NDP leader that's saying that no matter who replaces Justin Trudeau, Liberal or otherwise, it is a Trudeau Liberal and time for an election now. What is your reaction to that?
Well, my first reaction, frankly, is that today should be the Prime Minister's day. He served for 9 years. His record isn't perfect. None of us, if we look back 9.5 years, there's some blemishes on everything everybody has done, private sector, public sector, personal. I think he has a very interesting record in terms of child poverty, in terms of the child care, in terms of getting us through the pandemic, in terms of reconciliation with Indigenous people. I think he deserves some credit, at least from his opponents, at least on the day that he is leaving. I thought that Mr. Poilievre's statement was, frankly, is typical of Mr. Poilievre. He's a demagogue, and he missed a remarkable opportunity to be at least a little bit generous, but generosity is not in his DNA. In terms of a new leader, obviously a new leader from the current caucus or from outside the current caucus will be proud of a good part of the record. No doubt about it. And I don't think that Mr. Poilievre will want to run against the child benefit. I don't think Mr. Poilievre will want to run against dental care for low-income Canadians. I don't think Mr. Poilievre, it's quite interesting, he doesn't like all the spending during the pandemic. I'm not sure how many Conservatives voted against that type of spending. So what do you look for in a new leader? You look for change. You look for somebody who's going to have a government that is different from the predecessor government, but that at the same time believes in the values of a Liberal Party, that believes that a lot of the record was good, and it looks to the future. The economy of the last 10 years under Mr. Trudeau will be different in the future. It will be different because of the AI revolution. And as a result of that, you'll have a leader who will have different views at a different time and different interests. I don't think that it's a problem to say that the new leader will have been associated with the record of the Trudeau government. Sure, the problems with some of the record, problems with the record of any government. But I tell you, if you want to compare the record of the Trudeau government to the promises, the slogans of Mr. Poilievre, I think Canadians are going to look and they're going to say, the issue is no longer Justin Trudeau. The issue is whether Canadians want a new Liberal leader or Pierre Poilievre. My own view is that this opens up the possibility of a new ballgame. We'll see what happens in an election campaign, but there will not be an election over Justin Trudeau. And the other point, Michael, I would like to make is that in democracies, historically, 9.5 years is about as long as heads of government last. And it doesn't mean that their successor won't come from the same party. Margaret Thatcher, pushed out by her caucus in Great Britain after close to 11 years, her successor won the next election. Mr. Chrétien left, and I was there. He left because he didn't want to stay more than 10 years. But after 10 years, Paul Martin succeeded him. Mr. Martin won the next election. So I don't think it's impossible that the Liberal Party with the new leader won't win another election.
Let me jump in there, Mr. Goldberg, if you don't mind, because part of that is predicated on, as you said, a new leader differentiating themselves from Mr. Trudeau, and yet we continue to hear the opposition leader saying that whoever succeeds Justin Trudeau is essentially still a Trudeau Liberal. Is there enough time for a different leader to make distinctions between themselves and the Prime Minister before the Liberals lose the confidence of the House?
Well, I think it's a very good question that you ask. I mean, first of all, in terms of what the opposition leaders are saying, what do you expect them to say? They're saying exactly what anybody would have predicted they would have said. Is there time? I hope there'd be time. My own view is that the party should choose a new leader as quickly as possible. I think that there are ways in which they could do it pretty quickly with a robust public participation. I'll give an example. What if they have the caucus plus the members of the national executive and even the riding president from every constituency, Liberal constituency, to vote on a new leader? That would give a great deal of public participation. They could have town hall meetings, and they could do it over 3 weeks, 25 days, and there would then be a new prime minister in place who would have a bit of a runway to show how he or she would react or would act with respect to the issues that Canadians are going to be facing in the future, not with respect to issues Canadians faced in the past. And it would mean, how do you deal with Donald Trump? How do you deal with the new economy? How do you actually deal with some of the international issues? How do you deal with some of the problems that Canada faces? But I tell you, when I heard Mr. Poilievre saying that Canada is broken, I don't think there's a better country in the world in which anybody would want to live. Can Canada be improved? Every single government since 1867 has left a better country than when they took office, and that's the case. The Trudeau government wasn't perfect, but it leaves a pretty good record to build on, and I think the new leader may want to build on a new record. I remember there was a French president who followed the same party as his predecessor, and his slogan was change and continuity. And I think that's what Liberal Party would give, would be change and continuity. So, yes, it's possible. The faster they do it, I think, the better.
Robust enough, and I'm thinking actually of Kamala Harris, because she, of course, stepped in for Joe Biden in the summer without being primaried, and the very fact that that process was not democratic enough, did not essentially lay her to public criticism and figure out a way to respond to that criticism, that's been pointed to as essentially a weakness for her. Is the process, protracted as it is, enough time to truly vet the next leader, to know that they can carry the Liberal banner effectively?
Well, the one thing I'd say a couple of things. In terms of Kamala Harris, the 3 states she needed to win, she lost by less than 2%. So, she didn't do quite that badly, but she lost, and Trump won. My own view, looking at it from the outside, although a very good friend of mine in the United States, who was very active in American politics, said that her biggest problem is she didn't differentiate herself at all from President Biden. I think in Canada, there has to be some differentiation. I've said in an article I wrote last week or the week before, that Chrystia Freeland has differentiated herself in terms of economic policy from the Prime Minister by her letter of 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I think, if there's a new leader who has demonstrated the ability to, at one and the same time, demonstrate that they will be different than Mr. Trudeau, and at the same time that they're proud of Liberal values and proud of the record and that they're looking to the future, I think they have a very good chance of winning. And I think that would be the difference between them and Kamala Harris, who, remember, when she went on television, said she couldn't think of one thing she would have done differently. I think, Chrystia Freeland, just as an example, set out 2 weeks ago a couple of things that she would have done differently. So I don't think that it's the same thing.
I wonder, though, because I've heard that from Liberals, this idea that once you change a leader, there's a chance to give the party a reset. But you look at the recent numbers, Angus Reid having the Liberals down to 16% just a couple of weeks ago. A year's worth of polling which shows that the Liberals are in double-digit deficit up against the Conservatives. Is there really a hope for Liberals to take another election, or is that just Liberal wishful thinking?
Well, on election night, but I think that the question would be, do Canadians really want Pierre Poilievre, or is it that they didn't want Justin Trudeau? And Pierre Poilievre won't have Justin Trudeau to kick around anymore, if I can coin a phrase. And at that stage, we'll see. I think it's a new ballgame. Is it going to be easy? No. But is it possible? Absolutely.
Care to throw in your support behind anyone in particular? Because we are looking at this point at a very short list of possible successors.
I had written a couple of weeks ago that I think that the best candidate would be Chrystia Freeland, and I would support.
Eddie Goldenberg, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, let's pick up again the conversation with our panel. So a lot that was shared there. Stevie, I saw at least when Mr. Goldenberg was speaking that you were nodding your head a few times. What resonated for you with what he had to say?
Change in continuity, trying to, that, especially that last point he made it again, do Canadians really want a Poilievre government, or were they just really focused on a need to replace Trudeau, and had Trudeau sort of embodied a lot of the rage that people are seeing now? And when we actually take a look at Poilievre and his policies, which till now are pretty much, verb the noun. So what are we really going to see, and how much have the values actually changed?
Mm-hmm. Cole, is there anyone that might worry Conservatives?
I don't think so. I think every one of these Liberal leadership candidates still wears everything that Justin Trudeau has done. And I was listening to Mr. Goldenberg talk about how he disagrees with Pierre Poilievre that Canada is broken. Well, tell that to the person who's paying rent for a bachelor suite that's $2,500, whose weekly groceries are upwards of $200, whose gas prices are through the roof, who can't afford their bills, who can never afford a house. Tell them that Canada isn't broken, and see how far that gets you in the polls.
Mm-hmm. George, what do you make of what was said there? Do you think there's a Liberal leader that might still be able to win an election?
I think we're beyond that, and I think one of the biggest problems, as we've been saying, is that it's not the Liberal Party anymore. I mean, I think that's going to take a lot of work to convince people that this isn't Justin Trudeau's party. I think that's, no matter how different this, if I went in to lead the Liberal Party at this point, I'd still eat what Justin Trudeau has done, even though I opposed most of it, and even the things I liked, wish he'd gone further. So I think that's the challenge they're going to face. I think Pierre Poilievre does. We've been saying this for a long time, but I think he missed a chance today. I'm not sure about. I got to go as far as Mr. Goldenberg and say that he needed to be nice. Although I get that, I do think that you look at his statement, and it's just pure venom again. There's just so much rage, and and I think that he needs to step up. Because, I think you need to face the facts. He's very likely the next Prime Minister of the country. He needs to start looking like the Prime Minister to earn that. Otherwise, you're campaigning to be the leader of the opposition, and he will win that. He can win that back again. And I think that's where he needs to shift a bit. Watching the video today, I don't know if they were trying to soften him up. He went on and on. This is out of control. That's out of control. The music was out of control. And I think that, again, and we also saw all the slogans. He added a bunch to it. So I don't know if he's now trying to kind of grab all the pieces, but I think the biggest thing that has to change for Mr. Poilievre is his tone. And I think he needs to start looking like someone who's ready to lead this country rather than someone who just wants to tear it apart.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's got to be statesmanship over showmanship. And that video did not show me a gracious, statesman-like diplomatic leader who's going to be, taking Canada's best interest into U.S. negotiations. There was no grace or respect for someone who has given so much of their life to public service. And that music made me think of him. He was auditioning for a job at Dateline.
Okay, listen. I don't know if anyone if Mr. Trudeau will take comfort in this, but we do have a couple of statements to share right now because a couple of potential leadership hopefuls did share their thoughts on social media. Let's begin here with Mark Carney, and Mark Carney, essentially, as we know, former governor of the Bank of Canada, the Bank of England. This is what he had to say. Thank you, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, for your leadership, for your many contributions to Canada, and for the sacrifices you and your family have made for public service. Wishing you the best for your next chapters. We also found a message from Chrystia Freeland, who also turned to social media. I thank Justin Trudeau for his years of service to Canada and Canadians. I wish him and his family the very best. So, at least holding off on the criticisms today, congratulating him, thanking him for his time. We're now again in the midst of prorogation. We will be prorogued until the end of March. The Liberals, we should point out, the executive the executive of the party will be meeting later this week to figure out what the process will be in terms of finding a replacement for Justin Trudeau. So in the time that we have left, we have about 6 minutes here. What are you looking out for in the next few weeks?
I want to look very closely at what the rules are going to be for this upcoming leadership. How long do you need to step away from a cabinet position? Does it, is it going to preclude you from running in a sort of a subsequent leadership after the election? All of those sorts of things. Timing. I'm wondering how they're going to manage online voting in a leadership. I think that there's, and it's not 2013. Foreign interference is a much bigger concern. So managing that is going to be a huge challenge for I think, the Liberal Party.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how they actually pull it off, and do they have a new leader before the House of Commons resumes at the end of March? Whoever it is, I think from the Conservative side of things, isn't too concerned with any of the candidate fields. I think it's pedal to the floor for the Conservatives. I think Pierre gets out there and and campaigns this whole period. Why wouldn't you? Parliament's not sitting, so you've got all the time in the world to campaign, to motivate Canadians even further, and win a even larger supermajority here. So looking at all of the candidates at the field, there's going to be this will be a divided leadership race. They're not going to come out and play nice with each other, and the Conservatives will make mincemeat of all of them.
Okay, George.
Yeah, I mean, I think to go party by party, I think the Liberals have to figure out how this leadership race works, and they're going to have to figure out how they can build. But I agree with Cole to the extent that the federal election campaign has started now. I mean, we always say that, and it started 6 months ago, but I mean, now it's started for real. And I think that what's going to be interesting for the Liberals, it's a multi-headed beast that'll be running in that campaign for a while. So that's what's going to happen. I think, as I just said, I think Pierre Poilievre needs to start looking like a prime minister if I think he wants to do better. He's not going to take any advice from me. I think he's got a lot of good team around him that knows how to run the ground game, but I think he needs to start looking like a prime minister to really solidify that base and the next step of it. And I think the NDP, I agree with Cole. I don't think any of these leaders are going to do a good job of separating themselves from Trudeau to really be a threat. But I do think the NDP needs to not take that for granted. I think that with the campaign started, the NDP, as I've said, needs to really show themselves to be the alternative to the Conservatives. And I think to some extent they've done that, but because of the necessity of the deal they had, because it was a Liberal government, to get what they wanted, they had to work with the Liberals. And I think now the NDP is going to have to show that differentiation too and say, look, what we did, we could, but we're not them. And we're not Pierre Poilievre, so vote for us. It's either Pierre Poilievre or it's the NDP, and that's going to be after the campaign that they're going to have to run. And I think that's what you're going to see over the next few months. Mm-hmm.